What are the different types of income streams for services for people working in the TV and film industry?
Sure. Thank you very much for inviting me to attend and join tonight. In terms of the money that can be earned in the entertainment area, there's what's called fixed compensation or the fixed fee. And that might be something that's weekly or episodic if you're talking about television. It may be a fixed amount for appearing in a motion picture, $10 million, $20 million. But even though that amount is fixed, there's sometimes overages if the production continues beyond the scheduled period, right? So even those fixed numbers might go up. And then, the more complicated ones are kind of what's called the contingent compensation, right? That's anything that you're not getting paid for over the course of production. And there's several categories of that. One is a deferment. That's where instead of taking your $10 million fee, you maybe say, I'm going to work on this special little movie for only $5 million. And somehow you defer a portion of your compensation. And that the trigger for getting that additional compensation could be, it could be any number of things such as, finding distribution, a certain level of box office being achieved, or a certain break point when the film has made a certain amount of money. Usually there's a bit of a premium on that amount that's deferred, right? Because you didn't take it up front. So maybe instead of, if you've deferred $1 million, you might get, when the trigger is achieved, 140% of that $1 million that you set aside. Another category of contingent compensation is kind of bonuses for achieving a certain level of box office. Typically at a studio level, these don't tend to kick in until the movie has made 2.5, like the first one would probably begin at 2.5 times the cost of the movie. So if it was a $10 million movie, you probably wouldn't see your first bonus until the box office in the United States hit 25 million. And then there's sometimes awards bonuses. Probably these are more common just really for Golden Globes or the Oscars. You might get some level of bonus for a nomination and some for a win. Sometimes people try to ask for maybe a BAFTA award bonus, but that it tends not to move the needle in terms of advancing the box office of the movie. So those tend to get pushed aside. And then there's the back end participation of contingent compensation, and that might be where it's a net profits participation, or sometimes you hear people have no one has like a true gross participation anymore. It's usually some sort of adjusted gross participation that kicks in after a certain point in time. And I know everyone finds these things extremely complicated. You have to think of it not in an accounting sense at all in terms of net profits, but really these back ends are merely a formula. And there's interest and overhead on interest and interest on overhead and layers of different fees, and those are the things that get negotiated depending on the the level of the talent, where some of those amounts are either capped or eliminated for purposes of calculating the participation. When you hear about different break-evens or cash break-even with a 10% fee, that's talking about the distribution fee. So this is all finding ways to pay the talent a little bit earlier than a true net participation point, which would be with full fees, probably in the 25 or 30% range. So if you have cash break even 10%, that means we're for purposes of that particular participation, they're deeming the distribution fee to be only 10%. And then sometime the amount of your participation will escalate when the next trigger is hit. So it could be cash break 5% participation, a cash break 10%. So that's a 10% distribution fee. And then sometime you'll see it'll say escalating to 7.5% participation once we've reached cash break 20. So it's kind of a step or a stair. Once that new trigger point is hit, the participation goes up.
Bob, can I just jump in there?
Yes.
So I'm sort of developing or propounding discovery. Are all these rights and obligations set forth in a contract? What am I looking for? What kind of document I'm looking for here? And are those contracts renegotiated?
So the description of the participation is usually in the main portion of the actor agreement, but then the definition and how that participation is calculated is usually in an exhibit, a defined or gross receipts definition, which is the thing that you see that could be 25 or 30 pages long.
If any of you have ever read one of these things, they're mind-boggling. They're so hard to understand, and they're so difficult to figure out what's really going on that it's not for amateurs. And I've read dozens of them, and I don't understand what they're saying. So I strongly suggest that if you have the in-spouse, it's simple. Call the entertainment lawyer and ask them what they're saying. If you have the out-spouse, I suggest that you hire an entertainment lawyer and you get some advice as to what back-end rights there are and how likely after the film is released to ever see any of them. When you see a box office number and you see $71 million, this latest Jordan Peele movie, that's not what's going to the studio or distribution company. If they're probably going to get 50% of that, then so they're going to see 35 million more or less, I'm right about that, of what's going on. So when you read a box office, do not think that that's going to the production company or the studio that's releasing the movie. It's not. Half, and then it sometimes slides down from half to lower numbers the longer the picture stays in release. So to keep the picture running, the theater is going to get more of the take as the weeks go on with the picture. So again, when you read a box office number, it's not what the studio is saying.
I would just add something from an accounting standpoint, and being somebody who's worked on profit participation audits and whose firm works on profit participation audits. You know, Joe, you mentioned the complexity. One of the reasons is clear. The studios write them complex on purpose. But one of the things that we look for, in addition to when we're working on a divorce case as a forensic accountant, forensic expert, one of the things that I ask for is the actual participation. If there has been a participation audit, if one's in progress, and if one's in settlement, and if one is planned, because it's rare that that we conduct or anybody conducts a profit participation audit where the findings are less than $100,000, $200,000, and usually much more.
You have to be very careful about what you're going to audit. It's very expensive. And the audit rights cost you a bloody fortune to audit something. And then the real question is there a profit there under the definition of profit as it's set forth in this contract? And it is so dense that I defy anyone to really understand it unless they negotiated it. My thoughts.
Yeah, and just to finish this out, I mean, in television, the back end is usually referred to as MAGR, or Modified Adjusted Gross Receipts, and that definition can vary substantially company to company. I think some of the other income streams, there might be merchandising on a particular picture. If you're a director or a modest level talent, you might have some participation in the merchandising, but that probably just goes into the main big pot. If you're the creator of the particular rights, series of children's books, or you're an A-level star, you may be able to negotiate what's called kind of a separate pot for the merchandising and be able to share in that tranche of revenue, even though the movie itself has not achieved any sort of net profits. But from day one, the T-shirts and the games are flying off the shelves, and so you might be able to see some revenue there